Hi guys, for Bacon Back, aka Bacon in your chat. And today we're on another Halloween countdown. Hey again. So we're on a different, guys. It's called Mr. Scary. I don't know if it's the same as Mr. Nightmare or not, guys. This is the first this is a new YouTuber we're doing.
My mom is a nurse and works night shifts. My older brother and I
Hello.
are used to being home alone at night. My best
Here
friend came over for a sleepover night, so heck yeah, girls' night. We banished my brother to his basement bedroom, but I check up on him at around midnight. He was out like a light. I lock up, shut the house down, and text my mom that the house is all done and that we'll see her in the morning. My friend and I hang out in my upstairs bedroom and decide to turn on my computer and watch the popular web series, The Most Popular Girls. For those of you who don't know it, check it out. It's pretty hilarious. Anyway, we hear someone trying to stifle laughter outside the door as we
Why?
were watching this.
I love
My
Halloween.
friend Beth pauses the
Loving
video
Candyman,
and we hear
watching scary
someone
movies.
trying not to laugh. I threw a stuffed animal at the door and yell, "Fuck off, Dawson, go back to bed." And then footsteps go down the stairs to the ground floor, not the basement.
I'm sorry, guys, but I cannot leak that message on live streams. There's nothing I can do about it. So, this is a kid-friendly channel, it is, but there's nothing I can do about these. I don't know them. I can't bleed them because I'm not
Ground
around.
floor. I grab my phone and text him to stop lurking in the hallway, but see a few missed texts from him. They are as following. 12:20. Hey, Mom said to stay in the house at night, dumbass. 12:23. Can you stop banging around upstairs? Some of us actually have to sleep. 12:25. Thanks. There's a Sprite in the mini fridge, by the way. I immediately get kinda spooked because we never left the house, and we were upstairs in my room by 12:15. I called my brother's cell phone and waited for him to pick up. He did, sounding groggy. "This better be important," he said. I frantically explained what had happened, still wanting this to be an elaborate joke he was trying to pull. He was quiet for a moment, and then finally spoke, and I will never forget what he said. "Open your window, get onto the roof, take your phones, and go across to Dr. Tom's house. Call the police on your way, and after that, call Mom. And remember, I love you, and I love Mom and Dad a lot, okay? Go now." He hung up, and I'm crying as I push Beth out onto the roof. She, having heard the conversation, is already dialing 911 as she climbs down. I linger inside for a minute and start hearing crashes like breaking glass and furniture.
I think it does.
She yells for me to come on, so I escape out the window and we bash on Dr. Tom, who is my mom's co-worker's door. He's awake, being a night shifter on his day off, and lets us in. He knows my brother is in serious trouble, so he wakes up his wife and tells us to stay with her, grabs the gun from his bedside table, and heroically runs out wearing pajama bottoms and no shirt. After what feels like forever, there's sirens and yelling. Tom's 7-year-old daughter peeks out the window and tells me that there are cops taking a man from our house. There's also an ambulance outside on the street. I start bawling again.
Thanks, Rye.
Thinking for sure that my brother was killed. Later, my brother and Tom filled in the gaps for me. Dawson knew, since he was in the basement and underground, that if he tried to escape the house, he'd run into the intruder on the ground floor.
Right, people are joining from
being
your
very
stream,
concept,
from your
with
Discord.
not many walls to hide behind.
How many viewers do we got, Rye?
Being my
Can you please tell me,
brother, grabs the
I'm not
aluminum
looking
baseball bat from under his bed and makes sure that Beth and I can escape before going to face whoever's in our house. Turns out that this dude was armed with a knife, but my brother
Oh,
managed to bat it out of his hands. This intruder was crazy though, and tried to attack Dawson instead of trying to escape. There was a struggle,
it
and
is
they ended up
creepy.
knocking a lot of things over before
This is
Tom
more
ran
scary
in
than Mr.
and
Nightmare.
grabbed this dude from behind, holding a gun to his head. They restrained him until the cops showed up. They brought an ambulance with them because Beth had told them that my brother was in there and
I
could
added
have
you on
gotten
Roblox
hurt.
too, right?
Turns out that they did need the ambulance though. Dawson had broke the intruder's hand,
Thanks, Sarah's boys,
2
for
ribs,
subscribing.
and he suffered a severe gash on his leg, landing on a chunk of pottery that my mom insisted on keeping, and possibly had head
How do you
trauma.
miss?
The man's in jail now for breaking and entering, and
5
a few
true scary
other
stories.
unrelated charges that
It's
we weren't told
33
about.
minutes, so most likely the stream
We're
will
gonna
be
be
ending after these
notified
are
when
over.
he's released.
Hopefully,
I'm
Rise Henry.
so proud of my big brother for being so brave.
Welcome to the stream,
He
Eric.
wasn't injured, just a few bruises and scrapes, and was
Well,
treated
I'm
at the
seeing half the
scene.
people I've seen in your stream.
He looked for how the guy got in, and apparently one of the windows in the laundry room
Yeah,
attached
we
to the
do
ground
scary
floor
stuff
could be
during Halloween
open,
Countdown.
which we were not aware of.
Sorry, guys, I didn't have.
It takes
Well,
a
I'm
lot
gonna
of
pause this
propping
for a
to
second. Okay, guys, so I had Dual Recorder installed because I had problems up with my phone. I had to reset my factory reset my phone. Now everything's okay. We have Dual Recorder, Roblox, and Discord installed. Everything we need. For my stream, you mean? Thanks, guys.
slide it in to the side and fit through.
Epic Games.
That's how he
He's
got
a
into
co-owner
our
of Alex's
house.
group.
He didn't have any of our valuables with him, even though we did have a lot of nice things.
How
that
many?
you
How
would have
many
for
now?
sure
8,
seen.
I'm guessing.
He didn't even have
I
a
can't even
bag,
see.
and nothing was out of place besides a few of my mom's things, which really creeps me out. I'm not suffering any nightmares or PTSD over it, and neither is my brother. But
My Discord?
Beth, sadly, is having a few issues with it. She's in counseling, though, and she'll be okay.
If you guys hear that cuss in the background, that's Gaming with Kev. I just have him on.
I've been debating with myself about sharing this one. Mostly because I want to protect my then best
What videos
friend's
do I do?
anonymity.
Mostly live streams like Rye. You know. Mine's are... Well, it's pretty random. I do random videos. I mean, I do whatever my fans suggest. And the reason why we're doing scary stories, because you know why, we gotta prep up for Halloween. It's October 19th. We got like... Yeah, we got like 10 more days.
I decided to
11 more
carefully
days
avoid
until Halloween
identifying
comes up.
her and go for it. This took place in the summer of 2007.
Man.
I was 16 at the
Can you guys please just
time,
watch?
and I had
Hey,
a pretty
Connor.
bad habit
Guys,
of
this
crawling
is
out of my
Connor.
bedroom window,
I knew him
going for
before I
long
knew Rye
walks in the
Wilson.
middle of the night.
Connor, you've
I
missed
was pretty fearless by nature.
You guys can go if you guys wanna, but you know. But okay, guys, I'm gonna introduce you to Connor Bailey. Connor Bailey, you've missed Connor. You've missed a lot. Rye, you don't really know Connor. I do though. Connor, you missed a lot since you were last viewed.
But that summer, even I was getting nervous. There was a story going around of a guy in my neighborhood,
I have new people now.
which was not in the best part of town, attacking young women. The tale went that he would find them on a bus or at a bus stop, follow them until they were alone, and then sexually assault them. I thought it was just a rumor that persisted all summer and seemed to grow more elaborate and wild rather than fading away with time. On the second day of school, the rumor became fact. The police liaison for our high school held an assembly for all of the female students. She told us that there was a man who was targeting young women particularly petite women, and that
Yeah, and
while
you
no
miss a
one
lot of
has
my
been
streams.
raped yet, a few have been
We know our
assaulted
duo
but
record, but I don't know
managed
why
to
he
get
hasn't been on
away.
lately.
She told us to be safe and to never walk alone, especially at night. I didn't listen. Like an irresponsible teenager, I continued with my late night
I would
adventures like
listen.
I was
I see where
invincible.
this is going.
At the time, my then best friend was dating a guy who really creeped me out. At the time, I was casually dating
Still
a
same old
less than
phone as
stellar guy
always.
myself, so I
My
really
friend's got
felt
a
like I
friend.
couldn't judge. But this
That's
guy,
good.
this guy was something else. Every time I had ever encountered or spoken with him, my internal radar went off. He seemed like an average laid back kind of guy, maybe a little unmotivated, but an okay person. At the time, I couldn't figure out
Yeah,
what
I
it
have
was that
Roblox,
raised red
Roblox,
flags for
but
me,
I
but
only have space for
I
I
suspected it
right
was his
now.
body language, that
Befriending
subtle
people, I don't just
communication
like to do that
that
because
could
it's
give
unfair
away so
to people that
much.
are already my friends.
My friend and I
I only
had
have
been
friend people that
slowly
I'm
growing
in
apart through
contact
high
with
school
forever.
when she invited me for a sleepover just after Halloween. I thought it would be fun. We could watch a Disney movie and eat Timbits. It'd be great. When I arrived, I was suddenly doubtful. When I accepted the invitation, I didn't know that her boyfriend had moved temporarily into her house. There were two bedrooms upstairs. Her boyfriend was staying in the room beside my best friend's. I thought it was a weird situation, and I really didn't want to hang around with him. But I loved my friend, so I stayed. Throughout the evening, the boyfriend would make little comments here and there, just inappropriate enough for me to shoot him a dirty look, but not bad enough for me to risk rocking the boat by calling him on it. Finally, my friend put her foot down as her boyfriend was carrying the TV into her room so that we could watch a VHS. He suggested, jokingly, that we could have a threesome. My friend kicked him out of her room and told him to stop being gross. I was suddenly on edge. I didn't like the way he was looking at me as he left. I was so lost in my own thoughts that I hardly remember the movie. The movie ended around midnight, and my friend fell asleep before it was over. I turned off the TV, flopped onto the mattress, but I couldn't sleep. A very strange thought was forming in my head. The guy stalking and assaulting women. His physical description matched her boyfriend's. The stalker's MO was to go after small young
Thanks.
women. Both
This
my
is okay. Who agrees this is way better than Mr. Nightmare's videos? Mr. Nightmare is the one I used to do. It wasn't really that scary. I have to choose wisely now from now.
friend
Oh,
and
I'll be
I
doing a very special
were
one.
short
I'll
and
be playing a
slim.
scary game on
I knew
Halloween.
that the boyfriend had been in my neighborhood around the time of the
Oh.
attacks. I had even seen him
I
at
would
Woodstock
look, but
once
unfortunately,
on
I
one of
really
my
want to keep you guys
midnight
in. Okay, I'll
walks.
be quiet that you guys can listen.
I told myself that I was just being paranoid, and yet I couldn't drop the idea. After about an hour of lying in the dark, I was drifting off to sleep when I heard the door slowly begin to open. The room
Holy
was set
crap.
up with two.
Alright, guys, brain break. Story explaining time. I want to see your opinions in the chat about this one. Is this one making your heart beat faster or what? Is this boyfriend like a secretly like a killer? Who agrees that this is building up some excitement for Halloween? This is really building up. Maybe we should do this guy, but I don't really want to be doing like the same people. But this guy earned his name of Mr. Scary. You guys.
Mattresses.
Okay, you guys ready to get back? Alright, guys. Okay, guys, so please, please stay. I know Anton is streaming and all. I would join too, but I gotta stay on my stream.
My friend was on the one closest to the window. Mine was so near to the door that if I reached out my leg, I could close it. The door only opened crack before I reacted on instinct. I stretched out my leg and pushed against the door, quickly shutting it. My heart was beating so fast as my brain whirred through the scenario. Was it a burglar? No. I hadn't heard anyone coming up the stairs. It had to be the boyfriend. I
What's
waited
boyfriend's?
quietly for a moment to see
Let's all think that the boyfriend's Michael Myers in disguise. That's what I want to think.
if her boyfriend.
Mr. Scary. One more. Okay, guys, one. Mr. Spooky. I'm subscribing to him. Okay, you guys ready to get back? Look, 20K liked it. That's why I clicked on it. And I clicked the comments to see how it feels good.
Would do anything. Knock. Maybe he just wanted the TV back. He didn't say anything, though. Just tried the door. Again. And again. I scooched further down the mattress to put both my feet against the door. It was as if he couldn't decide what he wanted to do. He would try the door once or twice, walk quietly back to his room, wait a minute, then come back to try the door again. Now keep in mind, this door had no locks, so if I didn't keep my legs against the door, he could easily open it. I wasn't sure what to do. Finally, after about 30 minutes of silently trying the door, he went back to his room, and I didn't hear anything
Me?
else after.
Thanks,
So,
dude.
I just think he fell asleep. For obvious reasons.
Well, I'm not trick-or-treating this year, but I will be doing a live stream on Halloween. Right? Make sure to tell me your time, though, I could pick a right time. Halloween's on a school day, so guys don't blame me if I stream in like the afternoon. Cool.
Reasons.
I'll be doing a live stream. We'll be doing Granny.
I just kept my feet
yeah.
against the door,
Maybe
trying to
we
figure
will.
out what
Maybe
it
just do a
was
scary
that I would say to
story.
my friend. I had somewhere to be early the next morning, and my ride came at 6, so when I snuck out of my friend's house, she was still fast asleep. I left a note for her to call me ASAP. Later in the day, I called the police non-emergency line. Women. His physical description matched her boyfriend's. The stalker's MO.
Guys, missed a little.
I was suddenly doubtful. When I accepted the invitation, I didn't know that her boyfriend to open. The room was set up with 2 mattresses on the floor. My friend was on the one close, silently trying the door. He went back to his room.
Sorry, I missed this
I
part.
didn't hear anything else after. So, I just think he fell asleep. For obvious reasons, I didn't sleep that night. I just kept my feet against the door and tried to figure out what it was that I would say to my friend. I had somewhere to be early the next morning, and my ride came at 6, so when I snuck out of my friend's house, she was still fast asleep. I left a note for her to call me ASAP. Later in the day, I called the police non-emergency line and spoke to an officer. I told her that I didn't have a lot to go on, mostly just intuition, but that I did have a tip about the guy assaulting women in the neighborhood. The officer thanked me for the tip and reminded me to stay safe. For once, I listened. I didn't go on any nighttime walks for the next little while. Soon after, and before I even got a chance to talk to my friend again, her boyfriend was arrested. He had been the one after all. The guy sexually assaulting women. I guess the police were already suspicious of him. So, when his DNA was matched to the last assault scene, he was caught. It was a terrible thing to go through, but my friend was really brave, and she even worked with the police to get justice for the victims. The boyfriend pleaded guilty to 6 counts of sexual assault and 3 counts of sexual assault causing bodily harm in May of 2009. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and to be listed on the sex offender registry for 20 years. Moral of the story is listen to your intuition.
I don't even know what that means, but I will. Story.
Growing up, I lived in a small town in a
Is
heavily
anyone still
forested
here?
area. In around second grade, my best friend, who shall be known as Celia,
Right,
began
how many
complaining
viewers
to
are
me
there?
about very strange things happening in her household. The first thing that she pointed out to me was a smallish hole that was forming
Not as well, it's a start. It's better than what I've had on any live stream, guys. Right, thanks. Really appreciate it.
in the walls of her
Never had a good
unfinished
friend like
basement.
you.
The walls were made out of a sort of brick,
God, let's meet
cinder
you
block
guys.
material, and the hole was forming
I understand. Some of you guys went over to watch Anton's.
in the mortar, but expanding as if the bricks
Jay, you're probably staying because you want to hear the story.
were crumbling. I remember asking Celia if her parents knew about this, and she said they did, but weren't worried. Fast forward some odd years, and around 4th or 5th grade, the hole had only become larger over the years, and we could now fit a great deal of our arms into the hole. As far as my arm could go, we couldn't fill the end of the hole, and couldn't explain why it would corrode deeper, but not get much bigger in girth. At this point, Celia also told me that she began hearing voices in her basement, and that she believed most of it was coming from the hole.
It is. No offense, Rye. But you should have did like a scary game like Hello Neighbor. Hello Neighbor Alpha 1. That's still available. And it's not scary at all. I won't scare kids. I'll probably just give you like a few jumps. Not even really jump scares.
I never heard any of these sounds when I would visit her house, but considering we were only 10 years old when this happened, I totally believed her. We frequently had sleepovers on the weekends, which is when I was usually exposed to all the creepy things wrong at her house. Her family was kind of strange in the fact that they had an abnormal amount of animals. They had at least 6 cats and dogs, a few rabbits, birds, lizards, snails,
Too
frogs,
many pets.
fish, etc. Around the time when she was hearing the voices, we began noticing that her cats and dogs would randomly disappear and only be found later in the basement, standing right in front of the hole. In all the years that I knew her and her animals, I knew that they didn't like to be in the basement. It started to really scare us when she started telling me that she believed that something was living in the walls and was moving around her house, but the hole was one of their ways out. At this point in time, I believed her, but had never really seen enough proof to be scared as she was. In school, she spent most of her time an anxious wreck, and the teachers and other classmates were really worried for her. It really seemed to me like her parents just didn't care or believe her. A lot of adults believe that she was only being anxious because her much older sister was leaving for college. Now here's where we get to the most terrifying
Okay,
part.
you guys ready?
I was sleeping over.
I'm gonna ask you guys something. Now, I'm not trying to be nasty or anything, but do any of you have to do a bathroom break? Cause this might get scared. Cause we're about to get into the scary part. Even for those of you that like scary stuff, sometimes your body just can't take it. I don't have to because I'm used to scary stories. I haven't heard this one, so that's why it's kind of scary for me too. Okay, you guys good? Tell me in the chat, cause I'll wait for you. You guys good? Okay.
At her house during the weekend of Christmas holiday. A slight note about Celia's room is that she has a huge collection of stuffed animals of all sizes, clearly because of her family's love of animals. Anyways, the first night we were sleeping in her bedroom that night, and when we woke up in the next morning, we immediately saw that every stuffed animal, normally strewn about everywhere, was neatly arranged in a pile about 4 feet high. Every single one of them were facing us and staring right at us. I still don't believe now, and didn't at the time either, that someone or Celia could have moved all
I don't think he is. It's either these are true scary stories but retold.
those toys. I have always been an extremely light sleeper, and some of the animals were on top of a very large wardrobe. We both knew that whatever Celia believed to be
You're only 8 years old. Sure you want to see this? Are you sure you want to see this? It might be a little scary. It's my super
living in the walls had to have been responsible for this. We put back all the animals very carefully and never told their parents. I
I'm
sort
11
of
and a
wished we
half.
had now. Since I was staying the entire weekend, we went again to sleep that night in her bed. We woke up around the same time when it was still dark out. We heard a very low creaking noise that was coming from underneath us. We both knew it was the wooden floors under her bed, just like in a textbook horror movie. And probably because we were only 10, we thought it was a good idea to lean over the edge of the bed and look under. Right as we looked, we saw and heard one floorboard slam back onto the ground. We shot our heads back up and held each other and cried. I'd never been so scared in my entire life and called my parents the next morning to take me home right away. I refused to ever go back to Celia's house in fear, and she only got worse at school and home. I don't remember if I ever continued to ask her about the things in her house. Maybe I didn't because I was too scared, and we were just so young. For unrelated circumstances,
I
my family
know,
moved
but
far
these are
away from
stories,
that
Jay.
town that
They
summer.
wouldn't be.
I have only seen her twice after that, and that school and home. I don't remember if I ever continued to ask her about the things in her house. Maybe I didn't because I was too scared, and we were just so young. For unrelated circumstances, my family moved far away from that town that summer. I have only seen her twice after that, and that was a decade ago. I have never heard from her since, but have always wondered whatever happened, as I know her family still lives in that house today. Many have
Yeah.
suggested that this may be paranormal. I tried to be very detailed, but left out most of my personal thoughts on the matter, because the scariest part is not knowing. I want the listeners to
Alright.
create their scariest solution.
Dude, you can just
My
watch this
theory
while you eat.
is that there was a man or group of humans living in the walls of her house. The hole was their way of seeing and hearing what was going on in the basement. As in, if no one was in the basement, they could come out. The stuffed animal thing must have been someone who was disturbed and wanted to mess with her and me. The next night, I think the floorboard trick may have been their way of listening to us if we were sleeping. Since I only saw one board move, there is no way that was how they got into the room. They probably had several surveillance points, so they knew when to move around the house. So I don't think that this was paranormal. I think it was a real encounter with humans. This happened around July of 2014. Some background. I'm a
Why,
19-year
Senior?
old female, and at the time of this event, I was 18. Me and my friends live in a small town of Stony Creek in Ontario, living in Canada. We generally are not very concerned about rapists, pedophiles, or murderers. It was the summer before we
Why,
all
still
headed
here?
off to university, and we all just generally wanted to have a good time. So the five of us decided that we would have a sleepover at my friend's house, who lived around some.
Okay, I got a few comments on this. One, what's with those floors? Two, if that's a hotel, who would rent that into that hotel? It's hard on the streets, but I'd rather sleep on a bench than have to sleep in a scary hotel.
Somewhat suburban neighborhood. So 9:30 rolls around, and here we are, blasting music, drinking, and just generally having a good time. At this point of the night, me and my friends decide that we should totally go get a late night snack. Since I had drank two coolers, I couldn't drive because the G2 regulations of driving demanded that we have a zero alcohol blood level. No worries, we thought. A local Subway restaurant was just about 15
Hey,
minutes
Frown.
away from where my
Flower.
friend lived. So me and
Flower
my
Frown.
friend
Welcome to the
were just
stream.
walking on the sidewalk. My friend, being a little drunk, decided to talk in a really loud and obnoxious voice about how hungry she was. Sadly, the alcohol high I was feeling faded away quickly, leaving me to contend with a drunken, overactive teenager. As we were walking, we heard rustling. We looked up to see a man sitting on his porch just staring at us. This guy looked vaguely familiar to me, but I just couldn't pinpoint where I'd seen him before. He looked relatively tall, had black hair, and was a tad bit overweight. As we were passing him, I noticed that he kept on looking at my friend. I kind of shrugged it off and thought he found her attractive since she was short and looked way young to be 18. Older men were just typically drawn to her. As we were walking just past his small white house, I hear him call after us. I turn around, and there he is, in a gray shirt and black sweatpants, just staring really creepily at her. As we came to stop, he proceeded to ask us where we were going. Before I could muster a benign response, my friend happily tells him that we were going to Subway for a little snack. She doesn't usually act this sociable and is totally oblivious to the weird vibes that this creep was giving off to me. As his piercing gaze lands back out on my friend, he then goes on to ask how old she is. Now, I really start to feel scared. I know when an older man asks about a younger girl's age, nothing good can come from the situation. I try to
I asked my
signal
friends
with
how old
my
they are, I'm
eyes
older.
that nothing good can come from her answer,
This guy's a kid.
and that's when she stupidly blurts out that she's 18 years old. The creeper's eyes flicker for a second from her response. He tells her that she looks younger than an 18-year-old, to where she giggly replies that she often hears that quite a bit. Now, I just really want to leave. This guy is approaching closer to my friend, and I grab her arm, pulling her towards my side. The guy finally looks back at me and asked if we wanted to join him on his porch. I quickly muster a no as I try to push her down the sidewalk, but before I can turn around, he looks back to my friend and says in a deep, raspy voice that he will see her again before the night was over. I look down at her, and the terror is quickly drawn on her face. Now, I know we need to leave. I haul her in front of me, and we speed walk down to Subway, which was just about 6 minutes away, as I'm constantly looking back and seeing the creeper staring her up and down. Just before he looks to me, he opens his mouth in a shiver-inducing smile, which bares his teeth. He then proceeded to nod and turn back to his porch steps. I'm basically running now, carrying my pale-looking best friend as we walk into Subway. Quickly, I recite the orders to the lady behind the counter, urging her with my eyes to pick up the pace because I just want to get back to my friends. As the woman goes about making our subs, I feel a shiver across my skin. I turn my head to the side as I look out the window to see that guy again. He was right outside of Subway.
Why don't they just tell
He
the
was
subway
just staring
person
at
to
us
call
with
the
his
cops?
eyebrows drawn
Is anyone
together.
still streaming?
Now, I have no idea what to do. How can we just leave peacefully if he's waiting for us outside? What if he comes in? His eyes then gaze to my friend. His gaze then moves to my friend, and his pupils seem to dilate, and I know for a fact that he was undressing her with his eyes. I then noticed that he was lightly touching his crotch area, and he continued to stare at her. Now I know that this creep has gone too fucking far. I tell the lady behind the counter and point my finger towards the sicko. As she turns her neck to look at him, her eyes widen. She stops making our subs and just leaves abruptly to go to the back room. The creep notices that something was off and just turns and leaves, walking briskly out of the vicinity. When the lady came back, she abruptly handed me a poster. The name on the poster said that the man we had just met was named Keith, and that he was a convicted rapist in Hamilton. He sexually assaulted a young boy in a park and raped a blind woman. He even raped and beat a young woman in her parents' basement. The poster listed the details of his parole. He wasn't allowed to be alone with children under the age of 16, and he could not go to any community parks or pools. His curfew was 11 p.m. When we looked at the time, it was only 10:08. This guy was listed as likely to be able to reoffend again. The thing that really creeped me out was his unnatural obsession with young boys and girls. That was why he was so fixated on my friend. We didn't know whether to notify his parole officer since he technically didn't breach any of the conditions of his parole. We also didn't want to get in trouble with our parents for underage drinking and walking around at midnight. So we decided to just keep it to ourselves.
You idiots!
Shortly after, I called my friend to come pick us up because there was no way I was walking past his house again. This creep was the epitome of evil. He told a reporter that he calls his condition the devil's curse. His conditions were that he had to meet a therapist once a week to keep his sexual urges at bay. Thankfully, he was arrested a few days later for a breach in curfew.
Who's that? What the hell? They've all been watching.
This happened a couple years back to a friend and I. We were about 14 then. I was sleeping over at my friend's house and we were watching a movie in the living room. We lived in a nice area where there was almost no crime, and she lived in a small neighborhood almost no one passed through.
No.
Not allowed to be alone with children under her father had a key, so
Hi.
it couldn't have been him.
Is anyone
I
still
told my
streaming?
friend Cameron that I was gonna look through the peephole. I looked out and saw a man in about his mid-40s standing by the door. He looked dirty and was scratching at his head, arms, and chest. He was dirty looking and scratching his head, arms, and chest. I thought that he must have been on some type of drugs because he had wild eyes. I walked back to the couch where Cameron was and I sat with her. I thought that the guy had left because there was no sounds coming from outside. Just after I thought everything was fine, the door handle started to shake. The man was trying to get inside the house. Me and my friend's eyes widened in fear. I told her to turn off the TV and go behind the couch, just in case there was anywhere he could see through. "I want in," was the line that got my heart racing extremely fast. At this point, he was banging on the door.
Oh my god.
I want in.
Clearly, this man would
This
not
was
give
a
up
Darth
on trying to
Vader.
get into the house. Cameron was pretty much on the verge of tears, and I couldn't breathe. Luckily, Cameron's father had come home, and the car coming in scared the guy off. We ran to her dad and told him what had happened. He called the cops, even though there wasn't much they could do. I stayed the rest of the night, but in the morning, I went home. I told my mom and told her that the cops were called. My friend was horrified to be at her house alone for a while, so she slept over at my house every night. We never saw that man around anymore, which I'm very thankful for. That had to be one of the most horrifying moments I've ever experienced.
Okay, let's go and watch these 3, and then we'll continue on. Just want to see if this is by the same guy. Mr. Spooky, he's earned his name. He's earned his frickin' name. Wow. That's good.
This is by far the weirdest experience I've ever had. When I was 6 years old, I had a neighborhood friend named Trevor who was way older than me, like 6 years older. I always thought of him like an older brother I had never had. My sister
Trevor?
was about his
Trevor
age,
Phillips.
but she
Trevor.
always thought he was weird, so she never
Of
hung out with
course
him.
Trevor's weird.
In fact, I realized no one in the neighborhood really liked to be around him, but for some reason, I did.
Anyone know Trevor from Grand Theft Auto 5? He's a molester, a sexual psychopath, a druggie. Used to know Michael DeSanta from GTA.
Maybe it was because I felt bad for him that he had no friends, or just for the fact that he treated me so nicely, like his little sister. I would always tell him, "You're like the brother I wish I had," and he'd reply, "We're more than that." At first, I thought he meant best friends, but it turns out he thought it meant something more. About a year later, my sister and I moved out with my mom to my grandparents' home because my parents were struggling with their marriage and needed to take a break. That break lasted about 2 whole years until my parents decided that things were finally okay between them and we moved back into my old house. When I returned, most of the kids in the neighborhood were gone, but there was one familiar face I recognized: Trevor. I remember being so excited to see him, and I ran to hug him, but he placed his hand in front of himself as if to halt me. I stopped and felt confused. I thought maybe he didn't recognize me because I was now 10 years old, taller, and my hair was much longer. I began telling him it was me, and I was back, and that I missed him so much. He looked at me with anger plastered on his face and said something like, "Why did you leave me? I don't know if things could ever be the same again." I tried explaining to him what had happened, but he would interrupt me with, "You're a bad liar. I know you ran off with someone else." I was even more confused and promised him that I didn't. At the time, I never thought anything weird about it because I was so young and just really wanted my friend back. He wouldn't talk to me for a
Trevor's
few
not a good
days
person.
until he finally forgave me. From then on, we continued our adventures and played together like old times. But there were some things that did change. Trevor was now a freshman in high school, and he would always bring up stuff he learned in his health class, like the male and female anatomy. He would show me pictures of a penis and vagina that was from his textbook, and would teach
That's
me
Trevor
about them.
Phillips. Does anyone know who Trevor Phillips is? Yes. You think snake?
I kind of knew what they were, but had no idea what a penis looked like. And no offense, man, but
You guys are gonna have to find that out for yourself. That's boys.
I thought it was the
You have
most
to learn that and
disgusting
talk with your
thing
parents.
I'd ever seen. I would tell him that I didn't want to see these pictures anymore, but he kept saying that I needed to learn for later on. Later, he would begin telling me about how sexual intercourse was done, I was really annoyed and let him know that by raising my voice at him. He finally stopped schooling me, and things went back to normal. Fast forward 2 years. I was 12 years old, and now in 6th grade. I felt so mature and like a woman now that I had hit puberty. I made a lot of new
You hit
friends,
puberty in
but
6th grade?
they were just school friends. I would always come home to see Trevor, who was now 17. I was beginning to notice how strange he was when he kept wanting to play house with me. I didn't want to because I felt too mature to play childish games anymore. But he would always beg me and beg me to play one last time. So I gave in. He asked me straight out if I had started my menstrual cycle yet, and since we knew each
Hey,
other for so
you missed the
long
whole
and I
story.
was
One of the whole
comfortable with
stories.
him, I told him yes. He would continue to ask me strange questions about if I had pubic hair and what size bra I wore. I would just fake laugh it off and tell him that he was being too nosy. So we were
I
about
know.
to play house
But
when
I'm just
he
telling you.
decided to change things up by pretending that we were a couple about to get married. He made us dress up in formal attire and literally did everything that happened at a wedding. He even had fake rings to go along with it and sealed our marriage with a peck on the cheek. And whenever I tried to take the ring off, he would get mad and tell me that it was a gift and that it would be rude for me not to wear it every
Thanks.
day. Whenever I was around him, I kept the ring on, but I would take it off whenever I wasn't. Months went by, and I continued to notice how much weirder Trevor was, and I especially noticed how much more sexual he had become. I even had to ask him to leave my 13th birthday party because of how sexual he was acting with my other friends. Plus, he would constantly tell me that I was his wife, and we had rings to prove it. I would tell them that it was a sign of our friendship, but he would only get irritated by that. Months later, I came home from school and was surprised to discover a bouquet of flowers and a card on top of my dresser. In the card read something like, "Happy anniversary. Can't believe it's been a year already. Yours truly, Trevor." I was so annoyed
Phillips.
that he still played out the
I can
we
only
were
think that.
married fantasy. I was mad at my parents for letting him into my room without my permission, too. My parents told me, though, that they had never let him into my room. In fact, they had never even saw him. I was creeped out from this point on. I would try my best to avoid Trevor and tell him that I had a lot of homework. When we did hang out, he would make me feel very uncomfortable with his sexual comments, and he would always try to make me feel guilty for not getting him an anniversary gift. You know, we never really finished our
Dude,
wedding
well, it is. But it's not the pictures that are bad. Kind of like
yet.
scenery.
We still have our honeymoon left. His creepiness got to the point where he would call me at ungodly hours in the night to tell me how much he appreciated me, or just to say hello. I ended up ignoring his calls and put my phone on silent. Once I did that, he would literally show up at my bedroom window and tap on it until I would wake up. My sister would sometimes hear him and would tell him to go away, and that if he didn't, she would call the cops. He stopped coming, or at least I thought he did. I would start to notice things in my room, not the way they were before. For example,
I can't
my
play
bed
it.
covers
I
would be
can't play
messed
it.
up,
I'm on
and I
Android.
knew, in fact, that I had made my bed before I left for school. Decorations in my room would be placed in different locations or would vanish. I blamed my sister for those things, but she swore that it wasn't her. Things got even stranger with
Trevor
Trevor,
slept
and
in
I
the
no
bed.
longer enjoyed his presence. But one day, everything changed, and I never saw him again. It was like he vanished, almost like one day he was a creep, and the next he was gone. I asked my parents if they knew where he had gone, and they said that he had left to go live with his uncle or something in Illinois. I was so relieved to know was out of my life. As the years passed, I graduated from high school, and I never saw Trevor. I would sometimes see his mom outside, but she never would make eye contact with me. In fact, I noticed that she looked kind of nervous when she saw me. I never really knew Trevor's mom. She was always in her room when I would go over to their house. I could barely get a full sentence out to her. Trevor always said she was super shy. I visited home for summer after finishing my first year of
I
college.
got kind
I
of
was
the creepy part.
extremely happy to be home in my old room, which was basically a guest room now that I was gone. I was going through old stuff of mine my mom had packed in boxes when I noticed the ring that Trevor had given me. I picked it up and showed it to my mom, telling her about the odd time Trevor made me marry him and how weird it was that he left without saying goodbye, even though he had been mad at me for leaving all those years ago. He was such a hypocrite, I said. When I mentioned him, the look of concern was apparent on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and that was when she told me the truth about what happened to Trevor. Apparently, while we were all asleep, my father woke up to some noise. He waved it off as my sister or me just using the restroom or something and tried going back to sleep. Then he began hearing different noises. He said it sounded like someone was crying. He thought it was one of us having a nightmare and got up to check on us. He went to check on my sister when he noticed the sound was coming from my bedroom. He was using his cell phone as light, and when he was close enough to see into my whole room, what he saw shocked and angered him. There, in all his naked glory, was Trevor, staring down at me as I slept. Those weren't cries my dad had heard. They were moans from Trevor masturbating. My dad said, "What the fuck?" and began marching closer to my room, but Trevor heard him and ran out of there. By this time, my mom was awake because she wanted to know what was going on. My dad told her to stay inside while he went to Trevor's house to beat the shit out of him. Of course, he didn't. His mom begged for him not to and said that it wasn't his fault and that he had a mental illness. Apparently,
Can't help it.
Trevor kept repeating that him and I were married and that he was just trying to consummate our marriage. That really sickened and pissed off my dad. My dad threatened him by saying if he ever saw his face again, he would kill him. From that day on, we never saw him again. To this day, I still don't know where he went. Hopefully his mom got him some professional help because he definitely needed it. After what I experienced and from what my mom told me, it gives me the shivers and really disturbs me. I'm a woman, and I had a male best friend in high school and college. We'll call him Doug.
This one looks
We
creepy.
lived together in and after college, but were never romantically involved at all. Very much a sibling kind of relationship. One day a year, or two, out of college, we were out at a bar with some friends, and we ran into Meredith, who had been roommates with a friend of mine freshman year. We had a ton of fun hanging out that night, and after, we started inviting her out with
Yeah.
us more often.
I don't know.
She lived nearby, and suddenly she was hanging out at our apartment a couple nights a week, showing up with baked goods all the time, generally being a great friend. We went on road trips, we binge watched TV, we texted all day long. I would probably have described her after a couple of months of this as my closest female friend. Doug was still my best friend after so many years. But Meredith and I were
Yeah,
probably
guys, do what
spending more
Chris
time
said.
together than
Go
Doug
ahead and hit
and I
that.
were at that point. Since I did a lot of stuff with Doug too,
I'm sorry, but I
though
don't
we all hung out
participate in that
together
stuff.
and they started to get closer as well. After a while, it became clear that she had a crush on Doug, but he had started dating another girl at about the same time. He felt badly because it was clear Meredith was a little hung up on him. so he tried not to bring his new girlfriend around her or talk about her much. Not that he hid the relationship, but just tried not to flaunt it at Meredith. But he did send me and another friend who lived out of state and didn't know Meredith emails that mentioned details of the relationship with the new girl and how he was falling for her. One day, he called me furious because someone had anonymously forwarded the contents of those emails to Meredith, and that she was crushed and humiliated to realize that he was infatuated with this other girl, since the only person who received the emails didn't know Meredith. It had to be me. Although I hadn't done it, despite the screen name and anonymity in real life communication just isn't my style, and I would never want to hurt Meredith like that. I was pretty crushed that he didn't trust me enough to know that I wouldn't do that, but I also couldn't think of another explanation unless our out of state friend had really taken up online snooping to figure out who Meredith was. Ultimately, we just kind of dropped it as a sore subject for everyone involved. Although, around the same time, Meredith told me that she had ran into them at the coffee shop on a date and was extremely distraught, way more than makes sense for just seeing people she knew on a date. Which was weird, but people get odd when their feelings are hurt, right? Months pass and Doug breaks up with the other girl. Eventually, he does start dating Meredith. After all, she was always around, and she's clearly way into him. At first, things went well, but she gradually became more and more controlling. Eventually, she insisted he moved in, and from that point, she stopped letting him hang out with me or anyone else. We started to drift apart because he couldn't hang out with me without her, and she never wanted to be around me that often. One night,
Thank
she
God.
was out of town, and he, excited about a chance to see his friends, decided to hang out with me and some other people. And I swear to God, she called him 40 times in 1 hour. And when he finally told her that he really couldn't talk anymore right now, and silenced his phone, she called me and started out talking in a baby voice that, when I said I had to go, dropped in a full octave into a possessed sounding growl. At that point, which capped a bunch of small but weird actions on her part, I decided I was 100% done with dealing with her brand of crazy and blocked her number. And soon after that, I stopped hearing from him altogether too. It hurt after
I
so
like
many
the third
years
one
of close
better.
friendship, but people grow apart. That's life. But nearly a year later, he shows up on my porch with an apology, detailing what had happened in the interim. Meredith had gradually grown more controlling and paranoid, convinced that he was talking behind her back and lying to her at every turn. She grew afraid to leave the house and didn't want him to leave either, and would attack him in rages or threaten to hurt herself to keep him from leaving. One day they had a particularly big argument, and she got very drunk and confessed that she knew everything he did. It turns out that she had logged into his computer when she crashed at our apartment the very first night we all hung out at the bar all those years ago, and set his email account so that it would notify her if he changed his password. From that point on, she had gradually gotten access to his credit card and bank accounts, his social media accounts, and his cell phone account. She would literally follow him around town, even before they were dating, via pending charges. And of course, the anonymous email she had supposedly received had been an excuse to confront him about something that she had directly received from his email account. She also told him that she knew I was trying to keep her from him, and that she had always known it, and had to keep me close to be sure. This girl groomed me for 7 to 8 months, pretending to be my friend, going on vacations with me, giving me gifts, and sharing confidences, while secretly viewing me as some kind of arch enemy the whole time, just to get close to Doug. I found out from a mutual friend that even after all this was over, she still believed that I had been aware, on some level, for our entire friendship, that she was after Doug, and that I was trying to stop her. In her mind, all of the time we spent together was some kind of elaborate, one-upmanship scheme, or a game of strategy between acknowledged enemies. And here I thought that we were always just friends, but she had always hated me and viewed me as a perceived obstacle to being with Doug, and set out very specifically to violate Doug's privacy from the first night she met
Okay.
him in order to trap him in her house forever. He actually had to spend several weeks moving from friend's to friend's house after leaving her, because when he
Bye, guys. Or do some of you want to stay? Nah. Guys, I'm not gonna be watching Mr. Spooky again. That was too scary for me. Sorry, guys. Bye, guys. Or I might.